all the candidates for this session and all the candidates running this year for your dedication and service. I'd also like to thank all attendees and the audience who are watching this video. Thank you for being engaged, and that's what makes democracy work. We need to get ourselves informed and stay engaged. As long as we keep doing that, no matter what the election outcomes will be, we will have hope and we will keep our community strong. I came from a communist country. Back there, we don't have opportunities to participate. Here, we could get our voice heard, and for that, I truly appreciate. And I don't take it lightly, I don't take it for granted. I hope everybody share the same belief as I do. As long as we truly believe in democracy, I have confidence that we are going to find common ground to move forward. So we're going to have a very tight schedule today. Without further ado, I will give the stage to Vipin Shahwani, the president of FEI.
Thank you, Jean. And welcome, everyone. It's always good to see a good candidate forum, and there's no one that does it better than the volunteers of CAPA. So, great job. On behalf of CAPA and FEI, please, welcome to everyone. My name is Vipin Sehajwani, and I'll be the moderator for the Board of Education session. And just before we begin, does anybody know what do you call moderator with half a brain? Moderator with half a brain is called gifted. So you're in good hands. My first commitment today is to the audience. I want to make sure I reflect the issues and concerns that you have in mind today. My second commitment is to the panelists. It's not easy to run for public service, and I'm glad you all are doing it. I'll be asking some very fair, tough questions, but not insulting ones. So audience, when you ask your questions, and you will have a chance to do that, please write them, and please make them polite and tough. So with that, I'll go over the format here. The format is, each candidate will get 2 minutes for opening remarks, and then 2 minutes to respond to each question. Questions from the audience, you get 1 minute to respond. And then closing remarks, 1 minute each. I hope that's free. Great. So let's start with the first question. And this is a very hot topic for today. Superintendent just proposed his school redistricting plan for 23-24. Please share with your thoughts. And then you can do that. This is the first question, but you all get 2 minutes for opening remarks. So we'll start with that, and then this will be the first question. Okay. Judy, we'll start with you, and then move on.
Thank you for that question. Redistricting is always a very passionate topic for our communities, and unfortunately, we end up having to do it far too frequently. The superintendent has put forth a plan for redistricting to fill high school number 13. I do think that as a candidate, I've always been very clear that I support neighborhood schools and the closest proximity to the school. Unfortunately, his proposal does not do that, and particularly in the Elbridge area, where those students will bear an inordinate distance to travel to their school. I do think that it needs to be reviewed. It needs to go back to the drawing board, and for those reasons, I don't support that particular program.
Judy, it was my fault, but you also get 2 minutes to talk to the audience as opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was wondering when we were going to get to do that. My name is Tootie Adler, and I'm a Howard County resident for 40 years. We have 2 grown sons that went through Howard County Public Schools, and I have 2 grandchildren in the system now. I come from a business background. My husband and I started a family business from our kitchen. We opened our first clothing store in Timonium, Maryland. We grew our business to 23 locations. We had over 150 employees. And the point here is that you live with a serious sense of decision-making. Small businesses have no safety net. They fail, and they can fail fast with the loss of focus or bad decision-making. The employee salaries are a huge responsibility. As a real estate agent today, I serve each client's individual needs, using my learned skills in this lane to walk each client through the legal, financial, and emotional process that can often be very stressful. I believe boards need varying skill sets and backgrounds to get well-rounded input, and I have learned so much from other members of boards that I've served on. My past service includes the Howard County Planning Board, Plan Howard 2030, and the Howard County Community College Education Foundation Board. The Board of Education is a $1 billion entity. I do not know everything within this entity, and I do not have all the answers. But I have a commitment to study, research, and work collaboratively in service to the children of Howard County Public Schools. My goals for the Board of Education are to support a robust education experience for all students in a safe environment. Our Board of Education should ensure that students graduate with a solid foundation to move to college or career after the 12th grade.
Your opening remarks. Okay. Lynn, thank you.
So I'm the second.
Yes.
Hello? Okay. So I'm the second guinea pig. So actually my answer is blending to my self-introduction. So, yeah. And good morning. My name is Dr. Lin Chen. I have 3 kids attending each level of HCPSS. I'm a very involved parent, and in the HCPSS elementary school, middle school, high school. Also, I've been a committee member in a school, couple committees, and a scouting program, sports team, and the things that they can, taking many roles I could. You can find more information on my door hanger. If you are interested, you can grab over there. And my vision for the school system is that a successful public school system nurtures student well-being and create a sense of the belonging and the safety. And at the same time, providing students with the necessary resources to succeed. I know it's very, very important for our students to attending school close to their neighborhood, and which provides them a stable learning environment and supports their emotional well-being. That is why I'm against frequent, unpredictable redistricting based on the reasons other than the school utilization. And also, that's why I support to keep SRO at schools, provide environment safety so teacher can focus on teaching and student can focus on the learning. I want to emphasize my platform, commit to the quality of public education, invest in a school infrastructure, prioritize students' physical and mental health, and promote strengths of diversity and utilize tax money responsibly. I'm truly affiliated with any political party and put the students above politics. My independence will help to ensure best decision for all students. Thank you.
I'm Jackie McCoy. I'm dyslexic, so I really can't look at my notes. So what you get from me is straight from the heart, and my bullet points don't work for me. I am an educator of 35 years. My degree, undergraduate degree, is mechanical engineering. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, where the disadvantages that I experienced didn't hold me back. And so I understand struggle. I understand hard work. I did not learn that I was dyslexic until I was in my 50s. So I went through my education without that knowledge. And so I understand how to help accommodate for myself, to advocate for myself. And so that's one of the things that I believe we need to teach our students and our parents and the community. We need to advocate for our needs. And it does not have to be hostile. I am in this race because I'm the only person who is a trained educator. I've taught elementary, middle, and high school. All three of my children were premature, and so I got into education because I needed to help them meet their developmental milestones. So I got into education very early. So the most precious years, which we don't tend to think about, is 0 or birth to 3, where more than 85% of the brain is developed. And so my effort is not just to deal with, pre-K through 12, but to get the community to understand that we have to be engaged with our children from the beginning. And it's not just family only, it's community. We all need to support each other because as a community, we're only as good as the weakest link. And so I'm here to be the voice of every child, of every teacher. I'm not in it for anybody's particular issue. I am a problem solver, and people who know me know that I get things done, and I'm committed to get things done for the betterment of our children's education. Thank you.
Good morning. It's so great to see such a big crowd here on a beautiful Saturday morning. I think it speaks so much to our community's commitment to our schools and our kids. My name is Dan Newberger. I'm a father of 2 HCPSS students. I have a 4th grader at Swansfield Elementary School and a 7th grader at Harper's Choice Middle School. If anyone here is parents of middle school kids, you have my condolences. Those are really hard years. My family came to Howard County for the same reason I think most families come here. It's because of the schools. It's because of the reputation of our district. And that legacy of excellence, was built over decades. But what we found and what I've really learned so many families are experiencing as I've been among the community talking to families, is that reputation is slipping. The experience families are having does not match our expectations for this district. Our reputation is here, and a lot of families are having world-class experiences, but so many families are not. And that's, I think, a product of decades of us kind of being asleep at the wheel as a county. And you can see that in how we went years without building the schools we needed, and now our schools are in the wrong places and we don't have the capacity, so we have this constant disruption of redistricting. You can see it in our salaries, which we're struggling to claw back up to be competitive in how we pay teachers. Last year we were 7th in the state among school districts in paying teachers, and that's not how you build a first-class school district. We need to fight for talent. It's all about making our schools as good as they need to be for our kids, and that's about making sure that the classroom experience our kids are having is the right one, with the best teachers who get all the resources they need, and that's really how I see us improving the education of our kids. Yeah, it's that simple. I mean, it's when you cut down to the chase, it's a teacher and your child and the relationship between the two of them. That's what learning is. The rest is important, but it's details. And if we can focus on the classroom, if we can focus on the learning, and we can make sure that the kids can get what they need to recover from the pandemic, I think we're going to be in great shape. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Let's attempt the first question again. And the first question was regarding the current redistricting plan. Please share your thoughts. And we can start with Dr. Chen.
Okay. So regarding that, actually, Wednesday, I testified, and some of the plan are in 4 scenario, and right now the superintendent proposed one. I think it's not making sense to me, at least. I think look at the area that's more closer, and I think our culture should not shoulder the burden to do that. So I think we still have a lot of work sessions going, and I encourage all of us to have the voice heard and make it happen. And my position is always supporting as I said before, it's important for students attending the schools really close to their community in our own capacity, right? I think it's our school, high school, it does locate very close to the core area, Columbia area, when the area, at the perimeter is really difficult, but we still have a bigger responsibility. Those students need to be taken care of in the best we can. So, thank you.
So you have to forgive me, I have to stand up. I'm an educator and I get my energy from standing up. So if you think, why is she standing up? I'm standing up because I want to speak and you can feel my energy. When I looked at the plan, I didn't testify because I wanted to have some time to really study the plan and to see how the decisions were made. And I don't agree with the superintendent's plan. I don't know that the consideration for the impact on the students, especially those in the northeast part of the county, how it will affect them. The Route 1 corridor is very, very busy, and I don't know that that was taken into account when the decision was made. I'm not a person who makes quick decisions, emotional decisions. I try to study and to figure out what is the best solution. And so what I plan to do is to talk with the people in the community in Elkridge and those people along the Route 1 corridor, because they're going to be most affected by it. And as I develop my understanding of their needs, not just what the data says, because data is just numbers, but human beings are being affected by this. And so my approach is to listen and to take note and to use my scientific background to solve problems and to do it collaboratively. We cannot, and I don't, in my campaign, you will not hear me use the word fight. Because when we use the word fight, that whole idea of fighting shuts down our higher order thinking, our thinking brain. And so I advocate, I support, and I support strongly, but I will not fight because I want my thinking brain at the table when we're trying to make decisions. Thank you.
So I testified on this past Wednesday on the redistricting plan. I'm really disappointed in the plan. I spent years of my career as a management consultant. So when consultants bring back results this bad, I think one of two things had happened, or both. One, the consultants did things wrong, bad methodology. We'll talk about that in a second. But number two is the client didn't know what they wanted, or they couldn't convey what they were looking for. And I think that was what really happened. The board has kicked the can on really defining what a successful redistricting is, and we've seen that time and time again. And we just need to stop this cycle of endless redistricting. We need to build the schools we need to expand schools to increase capacity to meet the growth that the county's been experiencing. When I talk about bad methodology, if you look at what the consultants did, they just did what they've done. This is the same group of consultants we brought in 2019, and in 2015, and in 2013. We keep bringing back the same outfit from Columbus, Ohio. And I'm not meaning to slam them, they're nice people, but my God, there've got to be other outfits out there with other approaches and other methodologies that we should be trying. I don't know who's competing that contract. They did several fundamental things wrong, I think. And when you have a bad process, it's really hard to get good results. So we can get into some of the technicalities. I think the way they calculated travel distances was really skewed. I think the way they failed to take into account the complexities of the Route 1 traffic.
I'm just going to talk loud. They neglected to take into account how busy and dangerous Route 1 is. One of the most dangerous, busy corridors in our whole area. They made fundamental errors, and I recommended to the board that they need to send it back to the superintendent and tell him to do better. And holding the superintendent accountable is something that's been missing from past boards. The board's job is not to sit and rubber stamp and play nice and clap when the superintendent makes his presentation. Civil, polite, yes, but they need to hold him accountable for the results he brings them. And this plan that his consultants developed, that his staff developed, is not worthy of Howard County. So I hope this current board sends them packing and makes them bring back something better.
Thank you. To Dan's point on methodology, survey after survey, the community has responded to the school system that they prefer the nearest school, a predictable feeder pattern, and would want the fewest students to move. Yet the community overwhelmingly feels that their voice has been ignored. Would you like to carry the community mandate, or would you like to follow your own political view or ideology? We'll start with you, Judy.
Firstly, I would like to compliment Ms. McCoy. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Fighting is not a good word, and I appreciate everything that you said, and I agree with you totally. I do think it's very important that the citizens be listened to, and neighborhood schools, proximity, capacity are first and foremost. That's been discussed many times, and I think that they will have to honor those requests of the community and taxpayers. The children, moving around the county and getting bused is certainly, after what we've been through with pandemic and so forth, I should think that that would be a very easy accommodation to take care of with the resources that we have. Thank you.
So about that one, I think yes, the community already said pretty clear the top of the parameters. Top one is the nearest school. So, but the plan doesn't coming out to match the criteria. So that's really making me, it's very disappointing. So you have a very complicated model, you have an organization running this one, but the result doesn't match the judgment. Because we need the bigger picture, we need the detail. Sometimes, people look at the wood, but they lost the forest. So we need to have both. We need the details, but also we need to look back. The solution really works. And that's why highly, I put in the testimony, I highlight the nearest school and even a small feeding, all the parameters. It may not a perfect match, but we need a priority. Which one is more important, right? And I think as a parent of 3, I can tell how difficult when the school is far away. You have a school close, but you send a school far away. When there's better weather, when the kids get sick, when they have the after-school program, when they have clubs, they all need the parental support. They need the community support. You cannot raise the kids just by one person. You need the community coming together. So that's the logic behind why people make that near the school as the top criteria. I'm sure the board and the Dr. Malado, hopefully the new plan will make a change and make that one as top priority. So thank you.
I grew up when busing was mandated. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I was switched from my high school in 10th grade, so I understand the impact. But I also know that we are also products of historical inequities. This county, the way the county is laid out, it's not even laid out well for transportation. So trying to get students from place to place is really a challenge. The way our communities are configured, we're living in silos. And so we don't have a diverse community to the level that we should. And why is diversity so important? Diversity is important. I just attended a STEM, they called it STEM, but I call it STEAM festival at HCC. And one of the things that is important is that the diverse understanding of people of difference bring a better product. And so, yes, redistricting is hard, and it's always going to be challenging, especially when we don't address the issues of how we develop housing. We don't address the needs for good roads and transportation. We don't have a good transit system so that our children who are in after-school programs, who don't have the luxury of having parents who are at home to get back and forth, that's a challenge. And so we have to take all those things into effect and so into account. And so policy 6010 has to be really the guiding force behind the decisions that are made. But the thing that, number one, is the social emotional health of our children. How is it going to impact our children? So you ship children to a new district. Are you preparing the teachers and the administration to welcome those children? Are you preparing the students to go to an environment where they may be in a different kind of a climate? How do you support them in their needs? So whatever the configurations are, we need to center the needs of the children and make sure they're taken care of. Thank you.
Do you mind repeating the question? I just want to make sure I hit all.
Sure, absolutely. And this is about the community feedback. Survey after survey, the community has responded to the school system that they prefer the nearest school, predictable school and feeder pattern, and would want the fewest students to move. Yet the community overwhelmingly feels that their voice has been ignored. Would you like to carry the community mandate, or would you like to follow your political view or some policy or ideology?
Gotcha, thanks. So we absolutely need a school board that listens to the community. It's essential. Open communication, responsiveness, transparency, those are all things that did not happen in the 2019 redistricting and needs to happen in these processes. It's too important to our families and our kids to not have that. One of the difficult parts of public service, of government, is that the government needs to balance what the people want with what the experts say is best. Look at what happened with COVID, where finding that balance between people's individual preferences and wants and public health experts' advice, right? Getting that balance right is really hard. And it's the same thing with redistricting. We need to focus redistricting on what will produce the best educational outcomes for our kids. Because beyond the polygons and the data, we're talking about our children and their education. So that needs to be our focus. And the three factors that the current policy 6010 takes into consideration, let's break them down. The first one is facility utilization, how crowded a building is, right? We know that overcrowded schools do not lead to good outcomes education-wise, right? Long transportation times. We know that sitting on a bus for 45 minutes in the morning is not going to lead to children being ready to learn in first period. Bad educational outcomes happen when our buildings are overcrowded, and we don't take those factors into account. The second is community stability. And again, we know good educational outcomes come from keeping kids together with their friends, keep building those bonds. And that's important that we pay attention to that factor. The third factor, the demographic factor, the students, again, is important. And we know that we have better educational outcomes for our kids when we have schools that are not 70, 80% filled with children coming from impoverished backgrounds who have really high needs. If we can balance that need out among our schools, we know that that's better for every child. And that needs to be our focus on every child in the county. So it's a balancing act between what families really want, what they prefer, with what we know is best for all of our children. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to the budget. What is your operating budget priority for the school system? Where do you see potential improvement for financial efficiency? Judy, we'll start with you.
The budget is a very complex issue and something that we all put a lot of emphasis in year after year. It does seem like, as far as the promoting of Howard County schools in general, that there's plenty of money. We're Howard County and we're a wealthy county and there's lots of money. When I think we are beginning to face the fact that money is an issue and funding is tight. We have the blueprint also to fund as well. I would say that the instructional the middle of the school system, the middle students are the ones that are often, that has not increased for quite some time. We want to look at the overhead, that is pretty heavy. So I think in general, regularly the budget needs to be gone through, but we want to make sure that there's funding for every child to be supported. I am also a proponent of making sure that the areas where we need the support, where we have students who need additional support, that they're getting that support. So the budget is very complicated and very carefully look at spending the county and the voters' tax dollars wisely.
So I have a question. Your budget, you're talking about the operating budget?
Operating budget.
Okay.
Operating budget efficiency.
Sure.
Where do you see the scope for improvement?
Okay. So Vipin already know I was the HCPSS, BOE operating budget member. So I've been sitting there for listen all the discussion. I think it's a great takeaway, and also I contribute because I see a lot of issues coming up, and we can definitely do better in terms of efficiency. So if you people pay attention, I put my platform as utilizing the tax money responsibly. It's so important because our income are not always it's mature. The income doesn't increase that much. It's so important for us. How can we use maximize the value? How can we do that? For example, the money definitely need to put in the best spot, the classroom, the teachers, because that's created the value for everybody, for the families, for the students. We definitely need to cut overhead, and also some area, the budget, we also need to be nimble enough to make a change, because change is constant. We have COVID, we have in-person, virtual learning. We need to make sure that the budget can fit that. So I really have a big issue about the devices. Yes, for the virtual, we need to provide one-to-one device student ratio. But once we are in person, we need to look at that. Some of the device is not really necessarily students bring home and they damage that. That's $1 million every year. We definitely need to, how can we bring the students in-person instruction at the same time improve the quality of education and reduce the waste. So something like that, I think that's area we can definitely improve. And I'm the person, I will stick it on the ground, I'll make sure that it happens. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King. The operating budget, I've gotten this summer, I got a couple of emails from educators who are trying to get into our system. They wanted to be members of the Howard County Public School System. One woman had been trying for 8 years. I don't know what it is about our HR and what makes it so slow, but we can't get educators because other counties get our teachers, give them contracts before Howard County does. And so accountability is very important. So when we talk about the budget, $1 billion is a lot of money. And the question is, where's that billion going? As Dr. Chen talked about the devices, I know when my grandson was in the system, there was no accountability for the device that he brought home, and very little support for how to use it properly. And so whatever we do with the budget, yes, there's a lot of mismanagement, I think, of the money, because the priorities need to be where they need to be. And some of it is that it's mandated money, right? You can't, it's not just a contract, a budget where you can just do what you want. And so what I bring to the table is accountability. I'm very frugal, so I don't believe in wasting money. My children will tell you, they didn't get all the devices and things. We learned to play outside. And so I believe that the natural world has its place. But as far as the budget is concerned, I am going to look at it like a hawk, because there are places where we can tighten up. We have lots and lots of resources, but the place that we need to put the money most is in the teacher training and the salaries of the teachers. Yes, we're now, I believe, number one when it comes to income for the new educator. But I don't know that it's been spread across the board on all levels. And so we can boast that we now have the highest salary for our teachers. But that's just happened this year, and I don't know if it will continue. Thank you.
So the budgeting is one of the most important things that the board does. It's one of the few things the board can do actually to control the district. There's the budget, there's policies, there's hiring and firing a superintendent. That's really all the board has. Budgeting is huge. Budgeting is a moral document, it's been said. It's where our priorities become real because we put money behind it. I encourage everyone to go on the HPSS website and look at the current operating budget. Do it after a cup of coffee, but you should do it. I'm kind of a budgeting nerd. I worked in the Pentagon when I was a naval officer on the Navy budget staff. I studied budgeting, public sector budgeting in grad school. I worked in a charter school network as director of operations, working on budget for busing, buses and all the back office school HR, all the back office school operations. I have an understanding of budgeting. And when I look at this budget, the thing that most concerns me, first, the budget, there's two parts of the budget. There's all the fluff, right? There's a lot of pretty words from the superintendent, and it's great. And then there's the numbers. So if you go past the fluff and you go to the numbers, if you look at that budget and you were coming from, let's say you'd been you had no idea what was going on in year 2022, 23, and you looked at that budget, you would have no idea that we're coming out of a pandemic. That budget is the same fundamentally as it's been for years. It's just tinkering on the edges, incremental changes. So my concern is, where are the programs to address the learning loss for our kids? Where's the tutoring? Where's the new summer school programs? Not in the budget. We're not addressing the impact of the pandemic. This is capital budget, but where is the emphasis on HVAC in our buildings? Superintendent talks a good game about how safe our kids are going to be because they've got all this HVAC and HEPA filters. So many of our schools have HVAC systems that need maintenance or overall repair. It's not in the budget. And finally, mental health is a crisis in our country among our kids. And that emphasis is not in the budget. So that's what most alarms me, is that our priorities as a community, they're not showing up there. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Talking about learning loss, there is another loss, there is another crisis that has been brewing with our kids. According to a recent study, more than 1 in 3 high school students have experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. In 2019, it was observed a 40% increase. A 40% increase was observed since 2009. What would be your plan to address the mental health crisis among our kids? We'll start with you, Judy.
Thank you for the question. It's very, very concerning. Our young folks today are really struggling with so many things happening. They are really at the tip of the spear. I don't think that they could go to any adult who could say to them, I remember being your age when all the social media was there, and it's very hard to keep up. And I understand how you feel, because there are so many things coming at you at the same time. There are people talking about you on Instagram and so forth. So these young people are really experiencing something that nobody has ever experienced before. And clearly it's not going well. There are a lot of reasons for us to be very, very concerned. I think that we probably need to, the initiative is moving forward for mental health and counselors and so forth. Parents need to be very involved and stay close to your children. And young people need to have trusted adults that they can talk to. I do believe that we have some implementation in place for the school system to provide some of that. But I think we all have to be very well aware that young people today, coming out of the pandemic, the lack of the social time and how they were isolated is a very serious issue that I'm not sure that anybody will understand for a very long time to come. And it's very concerning. And I think we all have to be mindful as we interface with young people at all times. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Judy. Well said. So regarding that, it's one of my main platforms. It's about prioritize student physical and the mental health. The reason is why only the student, they have a healthy body, they can learn. So, and also I want to share my experience as a scout leader. And also I'm a pretty outdoor person. I know how important to make sure students can go outside, exercising, do the hands-on project, interacting with the peers, friends, not through the screen. If you look at the problem about the screen time and social media, because it pop up more after we have cell phone and the more screen time after 2007. It's clearly see that. I mean, every person maybe have a different, impact factor. So for the school, sometimes it's not easy for the family. The school have the responsibility to work with community and families. How can we minimize the use of the, in the school as well as the home, the screen time? Bring back some of the paper version homework. Use more sensory study learning. It's much needed. If you guys pay attention to my Facebook, I always try less screen time, more in-person learning, provide after-school programs. So the kids, they need to interact with each other. They have all the energy, make sure that positive energy take the dominant place. And I will fully behind my board member, I will definitely one of the key area I will emphasize. And also prevention is much better than the cure. We don't want the kids to get into anxiety, become special need. We definitely need to invest that, but it's better always to do the prevention. So thank you.
Absolutely, prevention is worth the cure, right? As an educator, when I was in the classroom, I started my day off with music. I started it with puzzles. I taught math. But my kids were coming into the classroom on their phones. My rule was no electronic devices in my classroom. And, got a little pushback, but I always won. But not all teachers understand how to effectively get those devices shut down so that the students can pay attention. There needs to be teacher training. Teachers really need to know how to help a child because, these devices are addictive. And so when you have a child who is constantly on that device, it's like taking a drug from them. And so you have to be aware of how to gently get the phone off of their minds so that they can tune into the classroom. And that takes training. We also need to have social workers and psychologists in the buildings to help students who are really struggling. But the first line of defense is the teacher. The teachers need to understand, and also the parents. We cannot forget the parents. Teachers can't do everything, and parents are guilty of allowing their children to just aimlessly be on those devices because they're just so easy. I've seen it done. We've got educators, young educators, who come into the system and they're addicted to their devices too, so they're trying to fight an addiction that they have to deal with on their own. And so there needs to be training across the board. I agree with Dr. Lin Chen about getting back to in-person engagement, getting outside and engaging with nature and talking to one another. As an educator, when I taught, yes, I provided things online for my students, but I also required them to do paper work and to engage in groups and work together. It's not all one thing. There has to be diversity in education to meet the different needs of the different kinds of students that we have to educate. Thank you.
Mental health it's really tough. This needs to be the top priority, one of the top priorities of this school district, because our kids, this generation is going through just trauma in ways we can't even understand. So, the pandemic was just the latest, but the world today feels so unsafe and scary and terrifying, and that's just for adults, right? For kids, it's even more so. And the numbers are shocking of how high the suicide rates are among our children, and anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation and cutting, and there's so much out there at even really shockingly young ages. I served on the board of the Swansfield Elementary School PTA, and a parent came to me because her 5th grade daughter tried to kill herself, and she didn't know what to do. And I gave her some names of some therapists I know, and I gave her all the resources I could, and she could not find a bed. She could not find an inpatient bed for her 10-year-old who wanted to kill herself. Shepherd Pratt, no beds. The advice I finally got that I was able to relay to her was, go up to Johns Hopkins in the city and go to the ER, and they'll get you admitted. That's what we've come to as a society. So we're not just unprepared as a district, we're unprepared as a community, as a society. The easy answer is, well, let's hire more psychologists and social workers, but they're not out there, right? That's the sad truth. Every school district in the country wants them. So yes, we need to do that, and we need to train our teachers to really understand what's going on. We need to really think about how we can build resilience and connections in our kids in the schools. In elementary school, we need to give them the tools they're going to need to face the fight they're going to have to just deal with the world that we're handing them. And in middle school and in high school, we need to build in programs and activities and a philosophy that we are making our kids resilient and strong and helping them build the connections with teachers, with friends, with the community that will give them strength. Because if we leave this unaddressed, we're doing an unimaginable just negligence if we don't address this. And there are no easy answers. It has to be a real committed effort.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody was on the same page when it came to mental health, right? The first time all candidates. Moving on to another topic, and this one is hot topic. Literally hot. It's books. Many parents object that their children can access explicit books about sexuality and sex. What is your stance on such books? And what would you like to say to the parents who object? So there are two parts to this question. Your stance, and what would you like to say to the parents who object? We'll start with you, Judy.
Thank you so much for that question. It's a very complicated topic, and there are people who feel passionately on both sides, so I'm very happy to be able to address this publicly. The books in the high school libraries that you are speaking of and that have caused so much controversy are, in my view, very unfortunate for the LGBTQ children. And I say this because I ask myself, why would that particular subject matter be put forward and parents be thinking about that specifically with LGBTQ children? And I think that's very, very unfortunate. I think I would have much preferred to see leadership not focus on that book, pass on that book, and not put such a white-hot light on LGBTQ children. I think that's very, very unfortunate. I don't agree with the books being in the high school or in the school libraries. That's not to say that I don't think that the book should be viewed by anybody who wants it or feels that they need it. It is in the public library. I checked. It can be purchased at Amazon. I think I would have liked to have seen a better policy from our public school system, and we wouldn't have such passionate, different opinions on this very important issue that really, really is focusing on children. I think children should have been sheltered from that exposure. Thank you.
So I look at the book issue, I think first, it's very sensitive and also very political. For me, I think right now, we kind of become a distraction. We talk about the books, but it's more important what we can do for our students. The book issue really matters every day for the students, and there's a lot of things we can improve. Another thing is the age problem. We definitely need to listen to parents and get a feedback. And also, if it's a legal issue, that the court decide. But my thing is that's a focus on the students and the focus on academics. There's so many urgent things there. We need to finish. We need to do a better job. So, thank you.
What's funny is that when you tell a child don't, guess what they do? They don't hear the not, they don't hear do not, they hear do. And so highlighting the things that we think are offensive is actually shining light on it. And so the reality is that children live in a world where they're exposed to things that we never would have dreamed of even 20 years ago. They have access to, when I think about when my children were little, we had the computer in our family room, and I watched what they, the dial-up that was back then. I controlled what they got to play with, what they got to experience, but then these phones that are little computers that they're exposed to things that are just unimaginable. So to take the time to focus on a few books in the school and to make an issue of it, all you're doing is making the children more curious. But the reality is that our children live in a world of diverse kinds of people. And the best thing we can do is to allow children to engage with people who have very different lived experiences, not so we promote any particular way of being, but to recognize that there are different kinds of people in the world, and we're going to live together or we're going to live apart. And as a community, we need to learn to appreciate differerences and not abhor the things that we don't understand, but to try to seek to understand. I know I've learned a lot. I lead workshops on understanding the brain science of bias and the history of how we became so divided. And I've learned so much, and I'm learning even more. But when we close our minds and refuse to listen to things that are things that we've never understood, when we don't want to learn something new, we're not going to grow as a society. Judgment about people's lives, that's on you. But to close off opportunities for children to feel that they belong in the school environment, I think is a problem.
Okay, so here's what I think. This is only a complicated issue because people are choosing to make it complicated. I think books and libraries are really important to kids. Every book in an HCPSS library, every book in this library, goes through a really rigorous process by people who have dedicated their lives to helping children with books. Policy 8040 in our schools, you should read it. There's a really rigorous pipeline that a book has to go through to be approved for the shelves. It has to be on a certain list of different bibliographic journals. It has to go through all these different wickets of approval before it gets on there. And if a teacher or a librarian wants a book that's not on those lists, then it's an even more rigorous process to get that book approved. So everything in these books are, and the experts are saying that these books are age appropriate. And what I would say to parents is if you don't want your children to read those books, then tell your parents not to read those books. And talk to the school librarian and tell them you really don't want your kids checking out that books, and that's fine. But having those books in those libraries is immensely important for our children. Books are windows and books are mirrors. Windows into other worlds and other experiences and to see what's in the world beyond our own personal experiences. And mirrors that kids who don't feel like they belong can see themselves in the characters in the book. Books save kids' lives. LGBTQ books save kids' lives. And yeah, there's some titillating books out there, but if we went right now to Miller Branch when this is done, and we found all the young adult and children, young adult books with sexuality, LGBTQ books that maybe are a little racy, it'd be like a stack like this. And if we went and found all these straight books in the young adult section that were the same, it would be to the ceiling, right? Like, look, that's what we're really talking about. This is only an issue because people are trying to make this an issue. But every book that they were talking about is saving some kid's life somewhere in this county. So those books need to stay on the shelf. But if you don't want your kids reading it, absolutely have that conversation with your kids. But also talk to your kids about what's on their phones, because guess what? There's a lot of stuff in the internet that you're not going to want your kids to see too.
Audience, if you have any questions, please do write them. Make them tough, but you have to make them polite. Thank you. Howard County is one of the fastest growing counties in Maryland. Our schools are crowded and overcrowding has become a real issue. Do you have a plan to tackle this overcrowding? And how would you work with various stakeholders to address this issue? We'll start with you, Judy.
Obviously, the overcrowding is really an issue, and it is a very interesting back and forth between development and school capacity that we are really struggling with. And it's really shocking that the entire process keeps going through over and over and over again with the same failing result for school capacity. And we just have to do something different. I do think that we will have to really reconsider our APFO program, and I think we have to work with the developers. I know the developers are always scapegoated, but they are doing what county officials allow them to do. So I think there's some serious coming together to figure out how we can get school capacity for our children as our county grows. But I don't think it's clearly not working, and we do have to do something different. And I feel like in a perfect world, my goal would be to sit down with developers, planning and zoning, and the school board, and work to come to an appropriate solution for all of our school students. Even having children in the portables is very concerning. So we have to do something very, very different, but it is going to take the community to work together. It's not one person on a board. The community has to really step up. Thank you for the question.
So the overcrowding and the development is a really sticking point in my mind. Because you can see I really, the second of my performance invest in school infrastructure. Look at my neighborhood where I live, North Laurel. We have so much development in the last 20 years, like a Maple Lawn and the Milk Plan, and it's just, you look at the map, it's just so much. And also in the Maple Lawn, the whole area. But you look at the schools, there's no new schools, all the same brick buildings. So what happened? Why we planning is lag behind? Why we are not investing in the hardware, the infrastructure? So really, it's shocking. And look at the recent, the redistricting is totally tied to that. We have the Jasper High School, but really all the development is in the East 95. We have a high school more close to the center. That's caused the community problem, the commute problem, and also the upgrade. We do need a high school 14. We talked about it for a long time, but it's so far we cannot see anything coming down. So I think also there's a lot. I think it is complicated process, but we need to start. We need the community to talk about. We need the board member to talk about. We need the council member. We need the county executive. We need the Annapolis lawmakers to work on that. We need to have the voice of her. Those students cannot wait. They waited 20 years. Even we built one, it was still too late. So thank you.
Thank you. Overcrowding is a real issue when I think about, I taught at Long Beach High School, and we have portables, and they seem to be permanent. They're not portable. They're part of the structure, and it seems to be that that's being ignored in the idea of the needs of building more school facilities. It's critical. But when we look at High School 14, that's now, 10 years out? But they do the planning for 5 years out. And so what are we going to do about the overcrowding? Are we going to continue to kick the can down the road? The other issue is infrastructure. With the existing schools like Oakland Mills, they have been trying to get their infrastructure taken care of for years. And so there's no incentive to take care of their air conditioning system and all the needs that they have to make the building at least acceptable for students to be in there. Overcrowded schools are a hazard to our health. But if we don't do long-range planning and in a way that makes sense, we're going to constantly be redistricting because of the configuration of the county, the way that the roads are set up, the way the communities are configured. As Dr. Lin Van Chin just said, their concentration is in the east side of the county, and there's so much development, but very little consideration for where the kid's going to go to school. When I see on Route 1 those multi-family dwellings, I'm thinking, how many children are going to be in those buildings? Is there any consideration when they allow this huge monstrosity of buildings to come up, and no consideration for the people who will have to be in those developments and where the children will be educated? And so we've got to look at the community, even as Columbia is aging. We've got aging communities, but we're going to have new families moving in as older people age out. Are we even considering that? I don't know that that's being considered. So thank you.
Overcrowding is a really hard issue, and part of the complexity is that we are living with the mistakes of the past decades of mistakes in not planning properly and not looking ahead and not building enough schools. So we're in this huge hole, and we're always playing catch up, and it's going to be really hard to do, and it's going to take real teamwork from the Board of Ed and the County Council and our state delegation to get this right. Because we absolutely need state dollars to build and to renovate in a serious way. Half, probably not quite half of our capital funding to build new schools and to expand existing schools the way we need to, we only get that from the state, and we only get that under certain conditions, and we have to show the need. So if we have schools that aren't at capacity, this school could be at 120%, and this school's at 70% across town, it's really hard for us to show need to the state. And that's why we're in this endless mess of redistricting, because unless we balance things out, we can't build new schools. But our failure to look ahead and to try to do things differently, that's what kills me. And it's like a slow motion traffic wreck when you see new building happening and we know nothing is being done to address the school issues. Look at Maple Lawn, right, down in Fulton, this huge new development of townhouses and single-family homes, and they're all in Fulton Elementary School, which is now really crowded. Well, guess what? They're doubling the size of it practically across the street with this new Maple Lawn Junior. I don't know what it's called. Where's the new school? Where's the new school? They didn't force the developers to give them land. They didn't think of anything creatively. And guess what? We're going to be dealing with overcrowding in that part of Howard County for years now because we're not looking ahead and trying to solve these problems in new ways. So overcrowding should make all of us really angry because it's not something that happens overnight. It's a really slow-moving disaster that continues to happen because we are not addressing it in the right way. It's going to take creative thinking and strong leadership and being unafraid to think about problems in new ways. Thanks.
Thank you. As I said,
That's a bit close also, sorry. I just try to add the traffic is horrible in the morning. So.
Good. On that traffic note, as I mentioned earlier, my first commitment is to the audience. So I'm moving to the audience questions. If you have those questions, please pass them on. And I'm moving away from these prepared questions right now. And you'll get 1 minute instead of 2 to answer these questions. So the first question is, what actions would you take to hold the superintendent accountable for student progress? Because apparently that is not what is being accounted for yet. Judy.
Well, I think one of the main functions of the Board of Education is to manage their one employee, which is the superintendent. So I think certainly as the board convenes for their new session, that would certainly be priority and very important to place as a standard for the superintendent. Thank you.
So for me, I have 2 standards. One is to listen to the parents, how they are satisfied with their kids' results. So I would definitely listen to the community. The second one, we are competing not just inside in the Howard County, we compete globally. So some of the standard testing can definitely show us how good we are. So this can be the indicator for us. So I basically 2 criteria, parents, how good they are, and then some of the standard testing can clearly benchmark where we are. So thank you.
The good thing about this particular race is that the people who will be a part of the school board will also be a part of selecting the superintendent when his contract is up. The current superintendent was renewed, his contract was renewed, but there was no community input. And so for me, accountability is important. Now I know as an educator, I can do a better job of holding the superintendent accountable because I've been at board meetings where, especially the math department would come in and say some things, and I'm going, they have no idea what those folks are talking about. But I will know, and as an educator, I will be able to spot when, we're getting a snow job or we're just getting glossed over and there's no real action behind it. For example, COVID, when they sent the COVID package, do you know when they sent those packets home, no answer keys. And there was not consistency across the board. So when children were at home with COVID, they didn't necessarily get a learning packet, and the parents didn't know what to do. So accountability is important, and I will do that as an educator.
And one of the biggest problems with recent boards of ed is they have not held the superintendent accountable. And that's a serious problem because that's the big part of their job. That's the biggest part of their job. And I like Superintendent Martirano. I would have him over for an adult beverage any night. But I will be his worst nightmare on that board because I'm going to hold him accountable. And he watches these board meetings, and he tap dances, and he blows smoke, and he runs circles around this board. And they try, but he is really, really slick. And he's a good guy. I believe he has the best interest of our kids at heart. But he's also a professional superintendent, which means he's a political actor of a very high degree. And the board is dependent on him for information. So they're trying to hold him accountable with only the things that he will let them see. And that's where I think we can make a difference. The board, the stuff at the dais is the least of it. That's the tip of the iceberg. If I'm elected to the board, I will be out in the schools, talking to the staff, talking to the PTAs, talking to the parents in the community. The board has to get information and from other places, because if you just rely on the superintendent, then yes, everything is great, because the 4 department heads he let me talk to said it was great. That's part of the problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Another hot topic. With in-school violence becoming more and more prevalent, how do you feel our school system can do better to protect students? Do you think student resource officers are needed to keep the students safe? Judy, we'll start with you.
Very good question. In some areas, the school resource officers are controversial. I, however, support school resource officers. They come from the Howard County Police Department with additional training from the Maryland Center for School Safety. A very rigorous training program is put upon them with lots of different emphasis on additional things to enable them to work effectively with students. I think that I would love to really be a bridge builder as well between the SROs and the families that do have a concern for them. I have spoken to the state's attorney's office. We do not have a school-to-prison pipeline in Howard County. We do have a wonderful juvenile justice appointed person at the state's attorney's office, and they do good work there. So we really do need the school resource officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. For my side, also I support SRO in the school because every student, they need to have a safe environment for them. I'm sure you guys all heard many of the incidents that happened in the last 2 years. But recently, it's just the Alphaton and the Wild Lake sports field, they have a fight. So we need a professional, even the police in place to make sure it's under control. You don't want the kids, they don't feel safe, they don't want to go to school, they don't want to attending the football events. This is not a good thing for all the students. So do we have to use SRO? Maybe not many places we don't have to. But if it's we need, we have well-trained people in place. And not of the teachers. I can hear a lot of female teachers, they said, I just don't have the strength to do everything, right? They need somebody who well-trained, who can make sure the situation doesn't escalate. So, thank you.
SROs, no SROs. I think that's the wrong question. The question is, are the adults in the building prepared to support the students? They're children who are struggling, and they need the support of the adults in their community. Their parents need to understand the stresses that they're under. The community needs to understand the stresses that they're under. Adults are under stress. We're all stressed as a result of COVID. And so SROs, just like educators and administrators, need to understand de-escalation tactics. I'm sure they're well trained, but the teachers as well. As an educator in my classroom, I was on the 3rd floor of the school. By the time I called the the assistant principal or the principal or the school resource officer, I'd already de-escalated the situation. So teachers are the first line of defense when it comes to that in the classroom. But what happened with the sports event, that was outside of the teacher's control. That's a community thing. And so we as a community need to understand how to de-escalate and help to meet the needs of our children. Thank you.
So, like I'm sure most parents here, school shootings scare the pants off me. I don't even like to think about it. I've got a 9-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old. It's any parent's nightmare. And I'm really worried that we're not getting it right in our schools. We're not ready, and we're not preventing, we're not prepared to stop that from happening. I'm really proud to be a gun sense candidate, along with Jackie, from Moms Demand Action, which is this national movement of moms and dads who are trying to pass common sense gun laws everywhere. We have too many guns in our society. What the studies have shown is that, SRO, no SRO, the way you keep kids safe is you develop rigorous plans to identify kids who might be heading down a dangerous, violent road. And that takes really strong teamwork among the school staff, the psychologists, the social workers, the teachers, the principals, law enforcement, to identify these kids early and get them the help they need so that it doesn't end up being national, God help us, national news in one of our schools. So we really need to focus on that and get that right. And I don't know if we're doing that here in Howard County, but that really needs to be our focus.
Thank you. There's another audience questions. All of you have referred to delivering a world-class education, but your answers have been rather vague. Do you have any focused areas or core skills that you're referring to when talking about world-class education that we should be imparting to our kids, rather than vague answers or policy answers?
Well, I think it's pretty clear in my mind, but thank you very much for the opportunity to clarify that. I think we do need stronger math. Our proficiency rates are not very good. I mean, we have some schools that are quite low. So my preference is certainly to let's focus on the basics. Let's make sure we get the core subjects and get those, make sure that our students are proficient and comfortable with core basics, and then add on to that. We're taking on far too many things in the school system. I'd like very much to see that we are just, and that's been my platform, is to just focus on a core education in a safe environment. Let's get that right so they have a foundation to move from there. Let's insist on that being right before we take on all the other issues of society. Thank you.
So every time that when the budget season, it's always some issue. Do we cut this one? Do we cut that? For Howard County, I'm really proud because we have such a rich program, like the music, the arts, the math, and the language reading. But we saw my kids go to kindergarten to 11th grade. I saw it deteriorate. For example, the science fair used to be a really good thing, and now it's disappeared. So I want to bring back this. All events can stimulate the kids' curiosity. Every kid, they have found something they are interesting. So I think the math study is very important because it's a building block for many other things in the future. The language of reading is also important for many jobs in the future. So I think we will definitely keep the core area, make sure the kids are challenged. They can do their best job in their own capacity, giving the material they need. We don't limit them. We don't put a ceiling there. Sky is the limit. Thank you.
Thank you. World-class education. This is an issue for us in the country. Of the Organization of Economically Developing Countries, OECD, there are 40 countries. We're number 32 in math. So even if we were the best of the best of the best in this country, we would be 32 compared to the world. So we've got to do a better job of getting those fundamentals established. As Tootie said, children need to know how to calculate in their heads. They need to know how to break down words. And we're coming back to the science of reading, which is phonics and the other tools that can help to make you a successful learner. But in order for us to have a world-class education, we need to make sure that children have the tools that they need to develop this world-class education. Those are the fundamentals, but we can't ignore the resources in the community. There's so many resources out there. This library system has a STEAM mobile classroom that we've spent lots of money on, but who's going to have access to it? Lots of resources. Who gets to use those resources is a question.
I love this question. I mean, when I talk about a world-class education, I talk about schools that are preparing our kids to go off and do whatever it is they want to do with all the tools they're going to need to achieve their dreams, right? I mean, we're preparing our kids for a future that we can't even imagine. But we know we need them to be great at math and not be scared of math. We know we need them to love reading and be good at it. And we all the, they need to know history, and they need to understand science, and they need to have, they need to be technical in the ways the world needs them to be. And they need foreign languages too. We really need to focus on world languages in this county. We need to give them all of these skills. And it's hard because, to do that in a real way, we need the best teachers, and we need to help those teachers to grow in their crafts so that they can really do the best job for our kids in the classroom. So if we focus on the classroom and the teachers, and we can get the right folks in, and we can help them develop, and we can give our kids, a safe, stress-free environment to learn, I think we're going to do them right.
Thank you. Very interesting question. For a well-rounded student, it is important to be exposed to the arts. How would you budget to enhance music and fine arts in the educational system?
Well, I think when we get to budgeting times, we want to make sure that that category is supported. I can say with certainty that I do know that music is, even the fine arts as well, is really a fundamental and very important component for a lot of people. And it's something that I would really support. And it is really, it does enhance your education, gets exposure to a lot of additional things. So I fully support that as a component for the core education.
So I think right now a lot of job it's cross-disciplinary. They are not fixed on one area, and it's much needed. Fine arts and the music, they can stimulate a lot of creativity. We definitely need to keep that way. And even for engineers, sometimes we listen to the music, it's make a huge difference. And so I will fully behind supporting that. And as a standard candidate, I actually want to have all, because in the community we have so many talents. We make sure all the kids they can pick the one they like, given the opportunity. Not everybody want to be structural engineer, right? But they can be a musician, finalist. So, and a lot of skills they can transfer. When they have a good foundation, they can develop their own niche. So, thank you.
One of the things that I enjoyed most when I attended the University of Maryland, I was in an engineering program, but I made sure that I took dance, and I took swimming, and I took music, because I wanted to make sure that part of me was developed. I know the push is for STEM, but there should be STEAM, which includes the arts. That part of the brain is just as critical as the parts of the brain that STEM, actually it's the same part of the brain. And so to have opportunities for students to have after-school programs, in-school programs, physical education along with the arts. Our children need to move. They sit too much. Their physical bodies need to be stimulated so that their brains can work. And so I'm all for the arts. I'm all for STEAM. So when you hear people say STEM, correct them and say STEAM. Okay, I'm supporting
Yeah, we absolutely need to defend arts and music and fine arts and theater in our schools. It's essential. It's so important for our kids. And I'm speaking as someone who just went through a year of my third grader practicing violin every night in our living room, which is I'm sure a lot of you know, a really unique experience. But it's so important for our kids, right? They need that, and they get so excited. It helps kids who even aren't engaged in school at all, like if they find their thing, if it's theater, or it's sculpture, or it's the tuba, like every kid has a thing, and when we can help them find that, it just helps everything about their education take off. So we have to defend those programs in our budget year after year. And we really need to look at after-school programs and making sure that every school, every child has access to great after-school programs. Some schools have them and some schools are lacking. We need to make sure that every kid has access, because there's so many great providers of programs out in the community, Drama Learning Center and so many art studios. I mean, there's amazing things here in Howard County that our kids can leverage, and we need to make sure that every child in the county, even those whose parents don't have the resources necessarily to do it on their own, let's help everyone get that, because those experiences are transformative for our kids.
Thank you. I have 3 questions that are addressed to specific board members. And Ms. McCoy, you're the lucky one, you get 2. So, Ms. McCoy, the first question is, in your remarks, are you saying Howard County is not diverse? What are you referring to when it comes to diversity? And generally speaking, we Asians get clubbed in one bucket. From Turkey to Japan, 4.5 billion people are called, Asians. Okay. So please define diversity as it comes to you.
Diversity means different things. It's not just racial diversity, it's economic diversity, it's housing diversity. We have housing in silos. In my community, I live in Long Beach, we have apartments, we have townhouses, we have single-family homes. So there's diversity in that. But in certain parts of the county, we don't have that level of diversity, so we don't get people who come from those lived environments. We also don't have the diversity of income, and so where you have people who live at different levels of income, their experiences are different, and that's valuable. And so because of the way the housing is developed in the county, it limits exposure to all kinds of diversity. That's what I mean.
Thank you. The second question, Ms. McCoy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'll keep you standing. You said when you tell kids they don't hear the knock. So do you mean we should not tell students, do not do drugs, don't commit crime, do not kill?
So I believe that you need to talk to them about what they should do rather than raise what they don't do. I raised 3 children, and I know my youngest, for him, the best thing was to give him an alternative. So not to tell him what not to do, but just to give him opportunities for other things. Because there's something about the human brain. The minute you raise a thing, just like we talked about the books, if you raise it, people become curious and they want to do it. So if you say, don't touch that stove, what's the child going to try to do? That's just human nature. And so I say, try to find an alternative way to engage them rather than saying not.
Great, thanks. Ms. Adler, you're the lucky one as well.
Do I get 2?
No, you get 1.
Oh.
Not that lucky. Ms. Adler was involved in Plan Howard 2030. As a board member, how would you work with various county agencies to ensure that the school site selection, school planning are in compliance with smart growth and AFRO?
Well, in my experience between Plan 2030 and on the planning board, and I made reference to this before, actually, somehow or another, we need to do a better job of working together as a community for, is this reference to school overcrowding, or is it school?
It's about school planning.
School planning.
Site selection,
Site
school
selection,
planning.
thank you.
Yeah,
Site
and compliance with that.
Yeah. So I think that we need to make sure that the people that are involved in that are all working together to do what's good for the county. I do think that sometimes it falls off if we have folks that are in positions of decision-making that are not doing things that are in the best interest of the county and may have political expediency. I do think we need people at the table that really want to be able to speak. I'm concerned about our Howard County public school system, and so are many parents. Past decisions from our Board of Education are not focused on education or mentoring of children in general. Some are quite onerous to families of Howard County, and here are some examples. redistricting that does not address overcrowding, removing SROs from our schools, motions to cancel midterms and finals, adding additional tasks to our teachers resulting in less instruction time. I'm in support of a robust education. Anything less is a disservice to our children. Our children will not be prepared to compete in the world workforce after 12th grade at this pace with these priorities. My mission is to serve Howard County within the Howard County public school system, and I will not use the Board of Education position to attain any other office. Thank you.
So thank you, CAPA and FEI, and hosting and all the volunteers to set up. I promise you, as your elected board member, I will focus on students, on academics, and create a stable, safe environment for all the students, and provide every student with the necessary resources to succeed. If you want to know more about my platform, please email me, and also I'm available after the forum. Give me the honor, be your voice on the board. You won't be disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you. As I think Dan alluded to it earlier, learning loss is a real issue. 2 years of COVID and the impact on our children, the impact on our educators, the impact on our families is a real thing. And so one of the things that I want to make sure is that we hold the system accountable, not to gloss over what needs to be done in order to meet the needs of our students. There's not one student who has not been impacted. And so I'm for real access, real education, and real family engagement. And under those 3 tenets, any question you have to me can be addressed. As an educator, I'm going to hold the superintendent accountable, and because I am not running for any other office, I didn't even want to run for this one, but I thought they needed an educator. I am committed. I will be able to visit the schools, talk to the community, talk to the students in order to make better decisions for our board, for our school system. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you, CAPA. Thank you, the hosts. This was great. And thank you all for being here. I don't know you, but I had a lot of fun. I really enjoy these issues. They're so important to our community. I love hearing what parents and community members care about and having these discussions. Our schools are so important to our community and our kids. Our kids are so important to us. This is the election. This is the one that matters. We're at the very bottom of your ballot. Yeah, we have a governor, all that stuff. But this is the one that matters, right? Because this is our kids, and this is here. And we have great schools, and we have problematic schools. And we have big, challenging problems. We can solve those problems together. It's going to take strong, serious, compassionate leadership on the Board of Ed, though. We need to address these problems head on, and we can do that. We're Howard County. Our kids deserve the best schools, and we can make it happen, but we have to be willing to address challenges head on, think about things in new ways, make hard decisions, listen to the community, all of these things. But if we do that, we're going to have the schools our kids deserve. I have some lid over there with my website. It's gogutenberger.com. I'll stick around and answer any questions. I hope to meet with all you, anyone who would like to. This was great fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you, audience, for coming, participating, and for your questions. Thank you, candidates, for running. Public service is hard. I'm so glad that you're running, and I'm so glad that we're here. And thank you for bearing with a very gifted moderator. If you didn't get that joke, you'll have to watch the beginning of the tape. Thank you.